I
Good
agree.
morning. My name is Steve Huntsberger. I'm the president of the Indian Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we are happy to have with us today Derek Donnell. He is with the Department of Labor and Industry. Derek, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit
Sure.
more. And we are happy to have him with us today to learn a little bit more about some work opportunity tax credits and also the federal bonding programs, which is an extremely important piece for a lot of our members. So, Derek, I'm going to let you take it away, and I'm going to turn my camera off, and I'll come back at the very end, and we'll hear be happy to hear what you have to tell us today. So, take it
Okay.
away.
Steve, sounds good. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. And thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to come in and talk about two programs that really give opportunities for businesses to save money and in the same time hire people who are at risk and invest in bringing those people into the workforce. I'm here today to talk about the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program. And if you don't mind, for now on, I'm going to say WOTC because Work Opportunity Tax Credit is a mouthful, and the Federal Bonding Program. I am with the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. I'm going on my 20th year with the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. I previously worked in Pennsylvania CareerLink offices as a site administrator. I've worked in compliance and oversight. I've also been responsible for coordinating the veterans program for the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. And now for the last 10 months, I've been fortunate to work with the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program and with the Foreign Labor Certification Program, which manages all the migrant, seasonal farm worker, and non-agricultural programs throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now that you know a little bit about me, I will get started with our presentation today on WOTC and federal bonding programs. But a work opportunity tax credit is a tax credit, but it's available to employers that invest in job seekers who have significant barriers to employment. I like to preface this part with saying I am not an accountant, I'm not an attorney, I am not a CPA, so I can't give any legal and or tax advice. I can only give information about the programs and services. If you as a business have questions about the legal or tax implications of the program, I would advise you to talk to your financial office, your HR department, and or your general counsel or solicitor. I am not a lawyer and I didn't sleep in the Holiday Inn last night, so I can't give any legal advice about the programs, but I can tell you it's a great way to invest in America's job seekers while saving money through tax credits. When I talk about the WOTC program, I like to look at the highlights, the big picture. And one of the most important things this program is the savings for employers. There's no limit on the number of new hires that an employer can bring on board. Any size employer can benefit from this program, and any qualified tax exempt, which is kind of an oxymoron in itself, as we talk about a tax credit for a tax exempt business, 501(c)s in this case, organizations are eligible to claim the WOTC tax credit hiring veterans. And we'll go into some specific classes of veterans in a few minutes. But the biggest thing is the tax credit savings for employers for hiring people. When I worked in the CareerLink office, we had a cleaning contractor who cleaned our building. And I noticed that he always hired people who were eligible for him to get a tax credit for. And we became golf buddies. And I said to him one day while we were golfing, uh, I won't say his name, but I asked him, what makes it so attractive for you to hire folks to give you the tax credit? And he told me how much he was able to save in tax credits per person that he hired. Small mom and pop business. He had about 50 employees. And he told me how much money he was saving as that small business through the tax credit program. And he's telling me the story as we're walking down the fairway. I'm starting thinking to myself, how come I don't have him paying these greens fees for me instead of me out here paying for myself? Now, I say that jokingly because I'm not allowed to say gifts. But the big issue that I look at took from this story was the savings for the employers. And he got this tax credit every time he hired someone and they stayed the required amount of time in his business. And we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So who are these groups of eligible of people that can provide employers with tax credits. All the populations I'm going to talk about on this slide are non-veteran target groups and dollar amounts. So if an employer should hire someone who is a SNAP recipient, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, if someone hires a TANF recipient, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, formerly known as welfare, in designated communities. Now, Pennsylvania, we have 2 designated communities, and this is the program through HUD. The 2 designated communities for the Rural Renewal Community Program are Venango and Warren County, and the Empowerment Zone designated community in Pennsylvania is Philadelphia. If someone is a vocational rehabilitation referral, working with the Office of OBR, someone with a disability, ex-felon, anyone who's receiving Supplemental Security Income, SSI, a long-term unemployed. In Pennsylvania, we define long-term unemployed as greater than 27 weeks. And again, long-term TANF. Now, the federal government looks at TANF in 2 categories: short-term TANF of under 60 days or long-term TANF. Pennsylvania doesn't designate between a short-term or long-term TANF. Pennsylvania has 1 TANF, and any short-term TANF people in Pennsylvania are called diversions, and they get a one-time lump sum payment, and that's it. So we don't designate between short and long, but the federal government does. And this is a federal government program that Pennsylvania is managing for the Department of Labor through the IRS. Summer youth, ages 15 to 21. If a summer youth person is hired in an empowerment zone, they are eligible for a tax credit for that employer of up to $1,200. Now, I talked about the target groups and who is eligible as non-veterans. All of those people in those groups have to work for that employer for a minimum of 120 hours to get the tax credit of $1,500. Should they stay with the employer the maximum length of time, which is 400 hours, the tax credit goes up to $2,400. So you look at, when I talked about the example of the contractor who cleaned the Cyrillic I worked in, if he was bringing in people and he brought in 4 new people per year, he was able to pull $9,600 in tax credits for 4 new people if they stayed with him for the maximum 400 hours. And one of the things I saw in my time working in that Cyrillic and being associated with him, he didn't have a lot of turnover in his business. But when he did, he was always getting the tax credit. Now, you look at someone who's receiving TANF, about a 2-year period, they're eligible for a $9,000 tax credit. So there's some benefits for the tax credit for hiring folks from these target groups that the IRS has designated are in need of circumstances that help an employer hire them because they have barriers to employment. On the next screen, we're going to talk about veterans in that tax-exempt group. So veterans come under 5 different categories. And if you're a tax-exempt organization or a non-tax-exempt organization, a for-profit company that hires a veteran who is a SNAP recipient, you're eligible for a tax credit of $1,500 for the minimum, $2,400 for the maximum. If you hire an unemployed veteran as a tax-exempt company, that veteran is with you minimum of 120 hours or the maximum of 2,400 hours, you get the $1,500 tax credit or the $2,400 tax credit. When I look at unemployed veterans greater than 6 months, long-term unemployed, the minimum is $3,500 with the maximum being $5,600. A disabled veteran who's hired within 1 year of discharge will bring an employer $3,000 or up to $4,800. Or a disabled veteran who's been unemployed long-term, greater than 6 months, brings in $6,000 in tax credits or $9,600 in tax credits. So before I go any further, Steve and Brent, any questions about the target groups or the savings that are available through the tax credit program through the IRS?
Not for me. Brent, do you have anything?
I would just say, what do you do if the hours lap at an end of a quarter or a year?
Brent, I don't know the answer to that question, and it's a good question. But when I go back to my earlier statement about the questions for the financial side of it, that's something for your HR people or your payroll staff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Good, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are some categories that are eligible for the WOTC program. If you hire a relative or any dependents of the employer, they're not eligible for the tax credit. Or if you hire a former employee, regardless of how long it's been since they last worked for the employer, they're not eligible for a tax credit either. I've asked my federal program officer at Department of Labor, the federal government, so what happens if we have an employee that comes in and they didn't get the tax credit the first time? They told me that they're still considered a former employee, regardless of whether or not they were eligible for the tax credit, but you didn't take advantage, as an employer, did not take advantage of it. So former employees cannot get the tax credit because they're not considered new hires. So I was telling Steve earlier, we're making some changes to our website, Department of Labor and Industry, at the state level, because there's some changes at the federal level to the program, some of the program forms, and some of the ways we do business with how we process the tax credit applications for the federal government. So I didn't put the Department of Labor and Industry's website information up here where you can find the forms, but you can find the forms at irs.gov or Department of Labor.gov. Both forms are available there. There's two different forms you have to submit to be eligible for tax credit. The IRS form 8850 is a certification form that pre-certifies the person for the tax credit. They fall into one of the target groups. And then the Department of Labor form is what we process to send to the Department of Labor for them to process for the IRS to get the employer to get the tax credit. So I hope you're not put off by the fact that we're dealing with three different government agencies here. We're dealing with one at the state level, Department of Labor and Industry, and we're processing the forms actually for the Department of Labor and the IRS. Do we have any questions so far about anything we talked about with the tax credits from any perspective, target groups, federal savings, or any other questions?
No, I think so the TANF, explain TANF to me real quick.
Sure. TANF is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. It was formerly the welfare program. They call it the welfare program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. But now there's a requirement within TANF that folks in some categories have to go look for work. Some folks are eligible for cash assistance. And at the federal level, there's two distinctions between the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. For short-term TANF, and I forgot what the duration is, they are eligible for a specific type of assistance. And then for long-term TANF, they're eligible for other types of assistance. Pennsylvania does not distinguish between the two types of TANF. We don't do short-term TANF or long-term TANF. We do TANF, period. In Pennsylvania, if someone's eligible for what will be called short-term TANF, Pennsylvania calls it diversion. And people who will qualify for diversion receive a cash payment, and they have a formula for the cash payment, but it's a one-time, one-and-done benefit for folks who want to access that program. So Pennsylvania doesn't distinguish between the two, but the federal government does. That's why I have to talk about it.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So we're going to move on to the federal bonding program. And the federal bonding program has been around since 1966. And this is another Department of Labor program that's managed at the state level for DOL. And what DOL did was contract out with different insurance companies for fidelity bonds. And the objective of the program is to get an incentive to the employer, again, to hire what's considered at-risk individuals who have a hard time finding employment. And when you talk about at-risk individuals, it's a broadly defined category of people who file for bankruptcy, substance abuse, ex-offenders, people who are dishonorably discharged from the military, and the employee doesn't get the bond, the employer does. And it's essentially a fidelity bond, which is a bond against any type of theft or dishonesty or loss for an employer. The employee who requires a bond to stay employed, for instance, due to a promotion, the employer is also eligible to apply for the federal bonding program if they have someone who goes from being, say, a retail clerk in a store to being a store manager, and now they're responsible for cash deposits or some type of increased monetary responsibility. Or if you're a construction company, for instance, and you have tools, hand tools, specialized equipment that could walk out the door, that federal bond covers your company in the event of any monetary loss or equipment loss. The best part about the program is it's at no cost to the job seeker or the employer. There's no paperwork to complete. There's no waiting. The bond is issued immediately. There's no deductible, and the bond is good for 6 months, up to $5,000 of coverage for theft of money or property. Now, the bond's good for 6 months at no cost to the employer. What happens after 6 months? Brent's going to ask me. Well, Brent, you don't have to let the person go after 6 months. After 6 months, it becomes that fidelity bond that you are responsible for the premium for on a monthly basis, and you're eligible also to increase the amount of coverage if you're paying for it, because you're going to pay a premium for the bond. So the bond can last past the 6 months, but then it becomes at a cost to the employer.
Good.
The program restrictions. The person must be of legal working age for Pennsylvania. The company must pay federal taxes through payroll deduction. There must be a job that lasts more than 6 months. This kind of weeds out the staffing agencies, the short-term employment, the temporary employment. We're looking at bringing people into the workforce and keeping them in the workforce. So we want to use that employer who's hiring folks in full-time competitive employment. Other people restricted from the program are self-employed, and 1099-R employees are ineligible. They have to be paying federal taxes, so it's a W-2 employer, W-2 employers only. The bonding process is simple, and I'm going to put my contact information in the chat for you, Brent, because the employer is going to contact my state bonding coordinator, and we're in transition right now. That person just retired recently, and I'm working on getting a new person in here to handle the bonding process for us. But the process is really simple. On the employee's first day of work or the first day of promotion into the new job, that increases their fiscal responsibility. If the employer contacts us, we can complete the online request. I remember I'm kind of new in this role, been in this role now about 9 or 10 months. And I've seen this process happen, or I saw the bonding coordinator while the employer was on the phone. And it takes really 3 to 5 minutes for this to happen. There's a series of questions that the bonding coordinator asks the employer provides the answer, and the employer will receive the bond immediately. And then the fidelity company that the Department of Labor is contracted with to run this program will send the package with all the contracts and the information in it to the employer within 10 business days. And it's a very effective program, but I have seen it happen before. I kind of went through this fast. The Afrin and the Benadryl kicked in. My allergies were acting up today. And I feel like I talk fast. But are there any questions, Steve or Brent, regarding federal bonding or the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program?
No, this was really good. So the RABWPO tax credits, that will give us more information, or is that a contact?
That's the contact link, Steve.
Okay.
And let me pull the chat screen up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna turn my camera off. I got too many screens running right now. I got 4 screens running. I'm gonna pull up the chat and put my contact information in the chat so that
Perfect.
you and Brent both have it.
And then we'll also make this available through our newsletter, and I'll throw this up on our YouTube channel, so a number of other people can get this at a different time. We'll have your contact information here if there's any additional questions. And so ddonnell@pa.gov. So that's
I'm putting my direct line in here as well. that runs through my computer. So even if I'm away and I have my phone with me, it rings through the phone on the Teams network on my telephone.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
I'm depending on how this actually shows up in the recording, I'll actually read that. So Derek's line phone number is 717-772-3720. That's 717-772-3720. Perfect. All right.
And
This
so
was
right
this was a
now,
lot of good information today. So, really these are almost this is ideal for the employers who also consider themselves employers of second chance.
exactly, Steve. Good
So
point. Very good point.
this is something that'll and can like give me an idea who might be the ideal kind of industry that is utilizing. Well, you said so retail would be one.
Retail's one,
Is
construction companies one. Yes,
manufacturing. So
manufacturing is one. Um, the big one, and now I'm gonna go back to WASI for a second, talk about some of the categories. The big category that we see for WASI is the people who are receiving the SNAP benefits. So say for instance, all my other categories are operating at say 10% usage. The SNAP benefit goes up like 60% of people who are getting a tax credit, employers get a tax credit because they hire someone who's getting SNAP. It is huge. You know what, Steve, you and I, when we get done here today, I'm going to send you a report I did for the last quarter that shows the amount of money that was saved per category for Pennsylvania using that WASI tax program. I should have brought that. I should have brought that with me today. Actually, when I redo this PowerPoint, after we redo our website, I'm going to put that into PowerPoint as well to show, like in Pennsylvania, say in program year 2021, there were about 83,000 WASI applications that we processed that were certified. And that saved employers, if they got the maximum amount, they saved like $220 million for employers in Pennsylvania only.
That's significant money.
That's real money. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
real money. Yeah. And it went up for program year 2023 to about 91,000 certifications we processed. And that was over $251 million if everyone got the maximum tax credit. So every year we're seeing an increase in the amount of employers using the program, which theoretically, we don't, and the IRS won't share the numbers with us in terms of how much money people are saving. They will not tell that information. And I'll share with you again, Steve, on DOL's website, they'll share the numbers of states. They'll show the numbers in states of the tax credits, but the IRS won't share how much the actual dollars were saved. But every year, our program has gone up about 9% per year on what employers are using their tax credit program.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
I think we're recognizing that there are. So we were joking before. Derek is from the government, and he really is here to help you. So, which doesn't happen very often. So we're happy for these.
Right.
We're happy for these, and we're happy to have people like Derek around. So this was great information. We'll be sure to share that. And I'm already thinking of a number of organizations and businesses that I want to specifically bring this to. But we'll get this up, and we can share this around, and we're happy to do that. So
good. Steve, let's stay in touch. Pennsylvania was awarded a grant this year. Labor Industry was awarded a grant. And I talked to someone yesterday about it. It's a First Step grant. And they which works with reinsurance. And I think the grant awardee that Pennsylvania subcontracted it out to was the Goodwill of Southern Alleghenies.
Okay.
So we're working with them now, and they're going to manage the grant for the Department of Labor and Industry. I'm not sure who the target group is, but I'll get you some information about that as it comes available to me. Because you look at second chance citizens and looking at reinsurance, any kind of incentives or tools you can provide that employer to make that population more employable is a good day for anyone, because that makes that employment, that pool of job seekers that much bigger.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and it's good for our employers, it's good for our communities, it's good for everybody. So I think this is really, really important. We always say the best social help is a good job, right? So
It is.
this is the first step, and I think some of us take that for granted.
Yeah.
And if we can provide these tools to our employers, it's really, really good for everybody. So I want to thank you, Derek. This
Well,
is
thank you.
and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording
Okay.
now.
Great.
I figured out how to do
And
it.
I'll give
Stop.
you back the